What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Greg at GB Productions here. The time has finally come. The case that has sat untouched here for at least 2 years now. I finally got 3.5 days here. We are going to absolutely pound this thing out, get the cylinder head finished up, get the cylinders honed, and flush out the bearings and whatnot, and then put everything together. Hopefully get this thing running and out the door before the end of this week is the goal. So yeah, join us along for the ride. First challenge here is to get all of this cleared out of here that has been collected since this has been sitting here untouched. And then once we're back to the engine, then we'll head into the basement again, get the cylinder head finished up. There's a bit of chat there to do with some unfortunately lost footage that we had. So we'll go all over that, get the head finished up, get the cylinders honed, hopefully put it together. Other than that, we should have everything else we need. I don't think there's any more money that should need to be spent at this point, unless there's some damage that's been done from it sitting for a long time with no oil and high humidity. So yeah, without further ado, we're gonna time lapse through this, get this all cleared out, and see how far we get. So join us for the ride. Alrighty, so that wasn't too bad at all. We're not fully uncovered yet, but that's certainly more than enough to get to what we're trying to do. The only thing really left is move the parts engine, at least out of the way a little bit, and then we'll uncover the cylinder block and see what the condition is like. I did spray a bunch of WD-40 on it at one point, over a year ago now, because I was worried about the rust that was starting. So we'll pull that off and just see. And I'll bring you in for a closer look at the cylinders in the crankshaft. But let's see if we can get this parts engine out of here to start with. I didn't bring any gloves. But bending the fan would be great, in case we need it. And of course, as is what happens when something sits for a long time and other things are going on, is all of the cylinder head nuts and washers got knocked down. So trying to make sure we got all of those. Luckily we have 2 sets because of this engine. Apologize for the wind noise if it's being picked up by the camera. It's like a hurricane here. So bring it a little closer here, I guess, and see where the engine's actually at. So we'll uncover the block here, which I had a bag over because the roof sometimes drips when it condenses. So try and keep some of the water out of it. It doesn't look too bad. It actually looks like the WD-40 did exactly what we've always understood WD-40 to do, and displace the water so that the rust can't continue. A little tiny bit on a couple of the cylinders here, but I think most of it will come out with the honing especially. Bring you in for a closer look here. Can I turn the... Oh, can't use the flash right now anyways. Other than, I guess it was this one I was looking at up at the top there. They're pretty good. That one's got some, but for the most part it wipes right off. Some of it's also the WD-40 as well, but you can still see some of the metal cuttings from when we did the ridge reaming as well. So I want to flush all that out. The rod bearings actually surprisingly look okay, or journals rather, because they were starting to get rusty a year or two ago when I checked on it because of all the humidity that was in here. So I'm going to do a flush, I think, of all the cylinders and of the rod bearings, maybe even part of the main bearings, because the first thing we're going to do after this runs for a little bit when we get it together is an oil change anyways. So we'll do that, flush it all out. I think from the underside here, I can't really see much because the crank is up so far, but it looks pretty good. Still a film of oil on most things, which is good. Still some oil actually sitting in the bottom of the bell housing as well. I have new gaskets for pretty much everything. They are up here. I've got a new oil pan gasket, new lower bell housing casting gasket, and there's two for that one actually, and then there's a new tachometer cable there, which I would really love to hook up, as we've never known what RPM it's actually doing to this point. And then in this other gasket set, we've got all the actual engine gaskets, the head gasket, thermostat gasket, exhaust intake, maybe a water pump, although we're not going to touch that if we don't have to. Although if I remember correctly, the water pump sounds horrible. Certainly doesn't sound great, but I really don't care if it doesn't leak. But it's not as big of a deal to do a water pump after. I think it's just the three nuts on the front side, and then this front casting comes off and you replace that part, or just put new bearings in it potentially. So yeah, not too long, looking too bad on here. We're just going to come along once the honing's done, or maybe even before we do honing, just for cleanliness. We'll do a scrape and potentially a little bit of a block sanding job on the block, because we're not going to get it machined or anything. It's way too much work to get it out of the tractor, because it's literally the frame of the tractor. So we're not going to do that, but we'll clean it up as best we can. We'll block sand the head for sure. I noticed my battery has frozen, which I guess I can expect because it basically sat without any charge for like 3 years. So that's on me, but I also knew the battery wasn't great to begin with, and what I've always wanted to do is buy a nice big new one for it, so we'll probably do that once we know the engine is all good to go. And then yeah, we also had to take the wheel off and break the tie rod end free at one point to turn the hub, because the big trucks, it's pretty tough to get them in here. So we were able to gain a few more inches by doing that. So yeah, other than that, shouldn't be too much else to it. Putting the oil pan back together and the support for the front axle there is going to be a bit of a trick, and then just figuring out where everything is. I put all the parts underneath the tractor when I took it apart, so it should all be there. Firing order for the distributor might be a bit fun too, but we'll figure that out. And yeah, hopefully we can get this thing running in the next couple of days, and get it out of here. Might actually get to use it to clear some snow this winter yet, which would be fantastic. So stick around, we're gonna keep digging into it here and see what we can get done. Well, hello and welcome back to the channel. We are back on the tractor project for episode 10, I believe it is now, where we're hopefully actually going to get valve guides changed out on the cylinder head here, get the valves lapped and reassembled, make sure that the head gasket surface is good, and then the head is done. We're not doing any more with it. And then we can move on to
getting the bottom end of the engine back together and the head on, and then hopefully make some noise with it. So in the last video we measured all the guides and all of the valves and chose the tightest guides and the largest valve stems out of everything we have to work with to build up the new head with. I have 7 out of the 8 guides new. There was one exhaust guide I couldn't get, so we chose the best existing exhaust guide to keep. So now we're going to attempt to press out the old guides. We're going to try just with, this is a punch that we made for doing the Volkswagen diesel valve guides, the Mark IIs, where you just put it in. This is the right size for the inside of the guide. You put it in, then you whack on it with a hammer to push them out, because you don't want to mushroom the top of the guide over by hitting it flat with like a hammer. So this is a little bit too small for these guides, but I think it's still worth a try, as opposed to just trying to hold the cast iron head up in the press, which we might have to do anyways, but we're going to try this first. So we'll get set up here on the floor with a couple of blocks of wood so that hopefully there's not too much bounce, and then we'll try that with a big ball peen hammer and see where we get. If we can get a couple of guides out, we'll show one of each of them, hopefully out and back in with the new one, and then we'll just buzz through the rest of them. Alright, we're going to give this a try. I don't know if it's going to work or not. This punch is a little bit smaller than I would like for these guides, but we'll give it a try and just see if anything happens, I guess. I don't know if that's going to work. We might have to get something a little bigger too.
Gasket fell out.
The gasket fell out?
Yeah, it was a little like washer or something.
Oh. I thought I felt something change toward the end there, but
Well, maybe something did move, but
I think all I've done is mushroom this tool. No, I think it is moving. This probably isn't going to last for 8 guides, or 7 guides, but it is moving.
There we go.
Yeah. There's one. That is not the way that I thought the guides went in, but that's okay.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah, that's not how I envisioned them working.
You see that washer around there?
Oh yeah. It might have been stuck in on the back side there where the nuts go in underneath to bolt the head down. Okay, well, that was fine. So I guess it would be a good time to grab one of the new guides and make sure that it actually is the same, because that would be good to know. Okay, so I think there was maybe some confusion when I got these parts. So my understanding was that this guide style, which I was only able to get 3 of, is the exhaust one with a step in it, but the one we just took out is smooth like the other one. So we're gonna have to take out an intake one here as well and compare. So we might actually have to switch gears here and find the best intake one out of the 4, which we haven't measured yet, if it turns out that these are backwards. I'm not sure how that happened, but it doesn't matter, we'll figure out. So before we put any back in, we'll take an intake one out, but as far as I can tell, these look identical. So by that, at least we have 4 good exhaust guides. So let's take an intake one out now and see if it's the same, and I don't have any of the right ones. Looking at the back side here, I think it is the intake ones that are stepped, and they should be shorter than these ones. No, they're longer, so I'm confused by that. So we'll see here. Let's pull a intake one out and see what it looks like. Okay, so we took one of each guide out here. These appear to be the same, intake and exhaust. However, see, they're the same length and they look like they're the same diameter on the outside. However, the exhaust guides stick out the top of the head further than the intake guides do, which means these new ones that we've got that are actually different lengths should be correct. The longer ones are the exhaust guides and the shorter ones are the intake guides. So we do have 4 new intake guides and we have 3 new exhaust guides, and it was exhaust guide 3 that we're going to keep, and exhaust valve 1 that's going to go in guide 3, I believe is what we said. So I guess let's try to put one of each of these in the head, and then we'll time lapse the rest of them and carry on. Okay, so those don't matter anymore, I guess. We'll put one of each of these in. I have no idea how this is going to go. We're going to give it a try. I don't know if our tool is going to stand up to this or not. And I also don't want to risk shrinking the guide because the punch mushroomed it in, so I don't know. We'll see how this is going to go here. Okay, so so that's what I was trying to confirm here. I think the exhaust guide sleeve actually has a lip at the bottom that stops it, whereas the intake is just straight through right to the cylinder. So hopefully that'll stop the guide at the right height so that this ends up longer. Okay, you want to grab me behind you there, grab me a clean shop towel off the roll, I guess, up on the wall. Just be careful, that rack's not very strong. And I'll just give these 2 holes a little wipe out. That's alright, I don't want to get it wet. I just want to make sure there's no loose particles that are going to get wedged between the guide and the head. Excuse me. And we will attempt to whack these in the same way I whacked them out. We'll find out real quick if they're actually right or not. Okay, let's give her a go. So we want the longer one for the exhaust first. Maybe I can get it started with, I am pushing it in from the right direction here. I don't want to hit on the top of there too much because I don't want to mushroom it. I wonder if we have a piece. This is an excellent demonstration of when to use a brass mallet. Let me see if I can find one here.
Okay, we'll cut.
Okay, so we are now back downstairs with the cylinder head. I apologize for the truly horrible lighting. We don't have much to work with down here. So I'm just going to get the head dug out again here. Stuff has been collected again over time. Basically what happened is, after the last video, we did in fact install new valve guides, 7 new guides out of the 8, because that's all I was able to get.
And in the previous video we had measured all of the guides, chose the tightest tolerance one and matched it with the largest valve exhaust, I guess. And we left that one in the head and we punched all the rest of them out, kind of a crude way, with this punch that was originally for the Mark II Volkswagen diesel cylinder head valve guides. So we used that with a big hammer, and as you can see it mushroomed both ends of it, but it did work. And then to put the new guides in, I used a brass mallet and then a steel hammer on top of that. I don't know where those went. Unfortunately, it did mushroom the inner end of the guide on each of them a little bit. So we ended up doing a little bit of massaging just with a file to make sure that the valves would all go in and out, because initially they wouldn't even go through all the way. So we did that to make sure the valves would all go in and out no problem. And we put all the valves in. They're in here right now. Yeah, unfortunately we lost all of the footage of doing that, but that's kind of what we did, more or less. Let's flip it up here. So there you can see all of these are new except for this one. Yeah, that's the one we left in there. It still has quite a bit of play, but that's kind of the best we had to work with of all the parts from the two engines. So that one we left, all the rest are new. All the valves, if not free floating, they at least move freely in the range of motion that they operate. It's sometimes a little snug to get them past the grooves for the keepers, but not a big deal. Once they're installed, they'll be just fine. They don't open more than a quarter 3/8 of an inch basically, so that should be all fine. Yeah, that one's really loose unfortunately, but that's just the way it goes. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a whole set of exhaust guides, so we'll just work with what we've got. So the next step then, after putting the guides in and making sure that the valves actually fit through, was to lap the valves. And the problem we ran into when we tried before, and I think that might be part of the lost footage as well, is the tool that my dad has is too big for the valve head. I think this smaller end would work on the intake ones, but it was still too big for the exhaust. So what I did since then is I ordered a set of tools that should have one that is more than small enough to do what we have to do. So this little baby one here should work pretty well for the exhaust guides. That should be a good fit on there. And then I think maybe not. I might have to use that smaller one for all of them. That might work for the intake ones, the bigger one there. Dad's is a little bit smaller. Okay, yeah, Dad's is a little smaller, so we use Dad's smaller end for the intake valves, and we'll use the baby one from the ones I ordered for the exhaust valves. This one we'll just keep aside for now. Before we do that, not that it's going to change anything, but before we get into lapping, and we'll explain all about that, we're just going to do a real quick check. Like I mentioned in the last video, we want to do a real quick check to see if the cylinder head is decently true on the head gasket surface.
If it's not, there's not a ton we could do. Like we could take it to be properly machined. Obviously I would rather not do that. So all I'm going to do is try and find a steel ruler here so that we can check how true the surface really is. So I just have a tri-square here. We're just going to use that straight edge of the ruler just to kind of check a few places, make sure there's no really bad warping in the head surface. It shouldn't be. It's such a massive chunk of cast iron that it would take a lot to warp it. So just check a few spots here. It's looking fantastic so far. Especially across the cylinders. There's a bit of a gap there, but I think that might just be, yeah, it's just carbon on this one, which we will clean all that off before we put anything together. Yeah, that looks pretty great, so I'm not worried about that, which is good. So at least that means we can, I'll use carbide scraper and scrape the surface, and then we'll use a block sander. Make sure this head gasket surface especially is good. There's also a little bit of carbon in a couple of the cylinder cavities that we'll clean out just to start fresh. But that's great news. The next thing then is we will actually get into valve lapping. So what I'm going to do before we do that is just put a little more oil on each of these valve stems, just so that there's no tension, because part of the process of this next task is the valves have to go up and down a million times, and so they have to float freely, and they also have to be able to come right out of the guide easily as well, so that we can inspect the progress that we're making. So just make sure they're all lubed up here. Most of them are good. This one just has a little bit, but again, the operational range of the valve is perfect, so I'm not going to mess with it. Okay, so then we'll turn it back down, because we're going to be working on the top for the most part. Okay, so I apologize in advance if this is going to be a bit hard to see what's actually happening here, but I will do my best to illustrate. So because of the way we have to use the tools in terms of which valves they'll fit, we're going to do probably, we'll maybe start with the exhaust valves. We'll do 4 exhaust valves, then we'll switch tools and we'll do the 4 intakes, just to make things easier. What I'll do is I'll go through in depth 1, kind of the process, what to do, what to look for, and then we'll buzz through the rest of them as a time lapse, basically. Okay, so maybe I'll actually start with the intakes here so that you can see that one that we're trying to do. So I think I already cleaned the tops of the valves, so they should be, oh, that one's got some oil on it. Basically they have to be clean, so if you need to get some brake parts cleaner, or in this case, do I have any brake cleaner here? I have some carb cleaner, that'll probably work. Basically you just need to make sure there's no oil on the head of the valves, because otherwise the
suction cup isn't going to stick very well. What we're going to do to start with here is take the larger of the two tools I showed you before. I'm actually going to lick the top of it. You can just use some water if you prefer, but you need the suction cup to be a little bit wet to stick to the valve. Push this back down for a minute. And we're going to try and get, without blocking the camera here, try and get a good seal on it so that it will move with us like that. Okay, I'm going to take it right out, and honestly, looking at, and I know we looked at them before, looking at the sealing surface, which is the outermost silvery color on the valve, and looking at the same surface on the head, they were really quite good to begin with. I think our main issue with the engine previously was just that the valves weren't closing because 2 of the springs were broken, or 3 of the springs were broken. So the idea with this is we're going to just polish this surface to that surface, especially because we did move 1 or 2 of the valves around. They're not in their original seat. This is to basically polish the 2 together, make a full hard contact surface all the way around each of them, so that when the valve smacks shut, it's actually sealed and we'll get fantastic compression. So I can put this down for a second without it roaming away. This is what we're going to use. Permatex, you can use any brand, but valve grinding compound is what you're looking for. I'm going to grab a little tiny screwdriver or something to apply with. This little rod actually will work, because you really don't need very much at all when you're doing this, because otherwise you just get it everywhere else. So that's kind of what it looks like. It's a, oh, don't do that, stay put. We lost our suction. Anyways, that's the compound. It basically has very, very, very fine, almost sand in it, but it's in a bit of a grease so that you can apply it. Gotta put our suction cup back on again here now. I can foresee that being an issue, I'm sure. Try this again. You want it to try and be as close to the center as you can get. Okay. Didn't want to hold it by the stem because it's all covered in oil. So I'm just going to take a little tiny bit of compound on the end of this rod, and I'm basically going to do 4 points around this surface of the valve that we're trying to polish. Hopefully I'm in the frame here. No, I'm not. So I'm just going to do 4 little dabs around that gray surface we're looking for. You really don't need much at all, because it's just going to squeeze out if you have too much. And then hopefully without dropping it here, I'm going to put the valve back in. Okay, now this is where the excuse me, the technique comes in. This isn't a brute force grinding method. This is very much a take your time, light pressure. You know, it's not going to necessarily be a fast thing, so don't be in a rush to get it done. And basically what you're going to do is rub your hands like you would do a pen. And as you do that, you're going to, each time you kind of do a quarter of a rotation, lift the valve up off the seat, which sucks the compound back in between the 2 surfaces. When you rub it, it squeezes it out, and when you lift, it sucks it back in. So you're rub and lift and rub and lift and rub and lift. And when you first start, you'll notice that it's very, very coarse feeling. And I lost my suction again. when you start out, you'll notice it's very, very coarse feeling as the compound is still, very gritty. But as you do more, you'll notice that it breaks down finer and finer and finer and finer and finer until, oh, this is going to be a problem. I can see that now. Anyway, the compound is going to break down finer and finer until you don't really feel any grit anymore. And if you get to that point where it kind of feels like you're not really doing as much anymore, that would be when you lift the valve out and wipe off the two surfaces and see what you've got. So I'm going to go for a little longer here. It's starting to feel a lot smoother. And again, you're doing a little lift kind of every time you go back and forth to bring the compound back in to the groove. And we're losing our suction again. I'm going to have to come up with something better for this. Maybe some Windex or something. Maybe I've got it too wet now, actually. Just want it to be slightly damp. But if you have it too wet, then it is slippery and then won't stay stuck. It's like a suction cup on a GPS mount or a phone mount or anything like that. Needs a little bit of moisture to adhere, but not too much. And now it's not doing anything, so it is too dry. Weird. I wonder if this one's also just too big. I was hoping to use the bigger one on the intake valves, but this one might just be too big around. So this one's feeling like it's maybe just about done with this batch of compound. What you can do is every once in a while stop and rotate the valve a quarter turn. Because actually, not so much on the intake, but on the exhaust valves on these tractors anyways, and others I'm sure too, the exhaust valves have these rotator washers that we talked about before. So, excuse me, as the valve goes up and down, this inner part is actually separate. As the valve goes up and down, it actually slowly allows the valve in the middle to rotate while the washer stays on the spring. So it's one nice thing actually to keep the wear even. Okay, that's feeling pretty smooth now, so we're going to pull it out without dropping the valve on the floor. We're going to wipe, like that. That's exactly what I did not want to do. And of course, a bigger work surface helps a lot with not doing that. So, I guess I'll grab it by the stem here just so that I can hold it more securely. So, as you can see, the compound is all the way around the surface of the valve here, so I'm just going to try and wipe all of the wet grinding compound off of there. And I think, as you can see already, I can certainly tell, I don't know if the camera can really notice the difference, but that looks 100 times better. Notice how it's a light gray, kind of all the way from the inner edge of the sealing surface all the way out to the tip. And basically what you're looking for is any pitting. There's a little bit of pitting there, any dark spots or pitting, or any sign that there might be a gap in the sealing surface, either from inside to outside or vice versa. So this one's actually looking quite good already. There's a little bit of pitting towards the inside, but there's not going to be too much we can do with that to an extent. So that's looking pretty good, especially for a first round of lapping. So I'm just going to set that here for a second, and we'll give the head a wipe as well and see if the results are kind of matching.
flash is maybe going to harm the image, but you can see, especially in just above the middle of the frame there, there's like dark speckly towards the valve guide opening, whereas the other 2/3 of the surface looks like the valve does. So there's a little more on the bottom of the center of the frame there. We might not be able to get all of that out. It might just mean that the valve angle surface is not parallel to the seat angle surface. And technically what you would do in that case, if you were doing a quote-unquote full rebuild, is you would get a 3-angle valve grinding job done, which grinds obviously the angled surface of the valve and the seat, and it also grinds the edge. Now in the case of the intake ones more so than the exhaust, a lot of them are getting pretty thin where the edge of the valve is here. If that gets too thin, the smacking of the valves closing can actually break chunks off, and then you'll have not only a leak but probably a burnt valve. Because the exhaust ones are so much thicker, see how much material there is above the angled seat there, those ones will never be a problem with breaking the edge. But a couple of the intake ones, maybe on the other engine are very, very thin up at the edge, so it's pretty easy to break a chunk of valve off. So part of the valve grinding job is taking down that kind of knife edge to prolong the life of the valve, basically. So anyway, back to the grinding part of it though. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking so far. I think we'll do one more round of lapping. All right, for purposes of demonstration, we'll stop there and we'll give the valve a wipe here again. And we'll give the seat a wipe and see what we've got. I'm thinking it's probably going to be good, but we'll double check. So, valve looks pretty fantastic. There's a couple of pitted spots, but we're not going to be able to get that far down, I don't think. But it looks pretty good all the way around. There is some pitting on the inner edge there still, but I don't think, like I say, I don't think we're going to be able to get down that far without spending hours and hours and hours lapping, and I'm really not interested in doing that right now. And again, it's not it's not going to be perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. We're just trying to make it better than it was. Again, like I mentioned before, if you were trying to build an engine up to be good, really good, you would either do it yourself or spend the money to have a 3-angle valve job done. And that would take care of all of this for you. Yeah, so it doesn't really seem to have changed. I think it's pitting that we're looking at in the valve seat towards the inside, towards the guide. So again, I don't think there's really going to be too much we can do with that without a grind job, which I'm not going to spend the time or the money. I want to get this thing back together
it'll be more than good enough for what I want to do, and it'll be better than it was, is really all we're aiming for here. So in a nutshell, that's basically valve lapping. Takes a bit of time. This is only a 4-cylinder, so it's not too bad. If you were doing an 8 or more, obviously you have a lot more valves, or if you're doing something that's got more than 2 valves per cylinder. So again, if you're looking to do a full rebuild on something, or you're building up an engine, just get a valve grind job done, as long as your valves are still thick enough to do so. But in a lot of cases you can just get new valves. For this, unfortunately, because of the age and the kind of specialty of it, you can't get new valves really, unless you go to a specialty, like a custom place. But yeah, so I'm just going to go through and do the rest of the valves, same as I just did there. Try and get the sealing surfaces all as good as we can possibly get. And then yeah, we're pretty much done with the cylinder head, except for scraping all of the gasket surfaces using the sanding block, just to make sure they're nice and clean and as true as we can get. And then honestly, aside from putting the valve springs and retainer washers and keepers in, this head is done. And then we can prep the block and hopefully slap this thing on. So I'm going to go through time lapse here and do the rest of the valves quick. So these exhaust valves are a good example here. They require a lot more work than the intakes do, mainly because they're the ones that get burnt. So this one had a lot of pitting to begin with, still has a lot of pitting, but it's slowly getting better. I've done 2 rounds already. I'm probably going to have to do another 1 or 2 if I want to get a decent surface. It's not bad, but it does have a lot of pitting in it still. So the exhausts tend to have a lot worse pitting and burning, so you might have to spend a little more time with those. Just thought I'd mention that. Alrighty, so with minimal struggle and some time and effort, the valve lapping is complete. I'm pretty happy with most of the surfaces. There's only 1 or 2 that are pretty badly pitted, and there's no way that we'd be able to get the surface cleaned up doing it this way anyways. Would need a proper valve grinding to to make that happen. But anyways, it's going to be better than it was, and especially now with good valve springs, the valves should all be sealing much better than they were, and the engine should run quite well compared to how it was running before. So yeah, with that, we're all done with the valve grinding finally. We're going to end this video here. If you like the video, don't forget to like, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the bell so that you know when we release new videos on this content and others. Stay tuned for the next episode where I will go through the rest of the cleanup on the head like we talked about, and then we will install the valve springs and the retainers and the keepers, and then this will be absolutely done, ready to go back on the tractor. And then after that we'll head back out to the shop and get the block ready as well to dump pistons in and make this thing run. So anyways, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.